Welcome to CMM Off the Page, a podcast brought to you by CMM Magazine, a brand of Care Choices Limited. Guest speakers will equip listeners with take-home advice to support best practice in the social care sector. The podcast is available to listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and to watch on the CMM website. We hope you enjoy this latest episode.
Care Choices is a multimedia publisher, event organiser and podcast producer. Care Choices works alongside industry governing bodies, local authorities and care providers to publish impartial information for individuals and their families or carers. With 30 years publishing experience, the largest portfolio of care and support directories in the UK and over 2 million page views annually, Care Choices is the perfect route for care providers to reach people actively seeking care and support. Contact Care Choices to discuss how we can help promote your business both online and in print. Give us a call on 01 223 207 770. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
Right, hello and welcome everyone. On today's podcast, we are going to be discussing supporting people to die in a place of their choice. The NHS long-term plan includes a commitment to roll out personalised care, planning for everyone identified as being in the last year of their life. The aim obviously to reduce unavoidable emergency admissions and ensure more people are able to die in a place of their choice. According to research conducted by the Nuffield Trust, the proportion of people dying at their usual place of residence, such as home or a care home or religious establishment, has actually increased over time from 35% in 2004 to 49% in 2021. We are recording this podcast on the 11th of May, and for our listeners listening, and for their reference, it is actually Dying Matters Awareness Week this week, and Hospice UK is encouraging communities across the country to come together to talk about death, dying and grief in the workplace. And we hopefully will be discussing that today, but today's focus will actually be on supporting people in care to die in a place of their choice. And I'm very pleased to welcome back Nadra Ahmed CBE, who's the Executive Chairman of the National Care Association. And we are also joined by Paula Plaskow, Paula is actually the end-of-life palliative care lead at Jewish Care. Jewish Care is the leading provider of care and community services for the Jewish community in London and the South East. So welcome, Paula, and welcome, Nadra. And we're also joined today by Claire Towns, and Claire is from Mary Stevens Hospice, which has been rated outstanding for its services. And for those of you that do follow CMM closely, Mary Stevens Hospice won the Development and Innovation Award at the Markel Third Sector Care Awards this year, and has been providing palliative and end-of-life care to people since 1991. And finally, we are joined by regular CMM contributor and also Markel Third Sector Awards judge, Claire Henry MBE, and Claire Henry Associates, which is the organisation that Claire works for, provides professional support in palliative and end-of-life care to individuals, teams and organisations, and also in the third sector. So it's lovely to see you again, Claire, and a warm welcome to everyone today.
Thank you.
Brilliant. So I think to begin with, we sort of, obviously, when we think about people dying in a place of their choice, that word choice obviously being really critical there. And I wondered, Nadra, if you wanted to sort of begin really and sort of talk about the importance of choice for people and what the barriers are around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I speak from several perspectives as somebody who has very recently watched a parent at the end of life care and how that went, but also as having been a provider over the years and seen the importance of people in our care settings and what their choices are, but then also, of course, the very important thing about people who want to go home to end their lives, who've got that in their mind and in their focus. And of course, choice is something is bandied about quite a lot in our sector. I think colleagues will agree. But what we've got to be really clear about is we've also got alongside that to think about best interest and the support that can be provided, because all of it needs to be in place in order to make sure that we do the very best we can in the last hours, days, weeks of somebody's life. And it can be quite a long period. You know that end of life can take several weeks or months even sometimes, but it can also be very, very quick. And the impact of all of those decision-making processes. And very often you hear about people who are in hospital and have been told that they're now on palliative care, and they either want to go home or they want to go back to the care setting that they call their own home. And then getting that machinery into place in order to make that happen can be quite challenging. And you also then have to look at the factors around what the condition is, the complexity of the condition, and how a move is going to impact on them, but also the family support. So I think there are several factors that need to come into play. But the wishes of somebody who can make that decision have to be paramount. And if they cannot be fulfilled, then there has to be a rational discussion around to make sure that you make it the best experience that you can. So, and that includes enabling families and friends to be nearby. And having just all experienced COVID, we know the impact that has had. And I found it very difficult. I've been working in the care sector for over 40 years. It's 42 years now that I started, and I've run home care services, I've run care services. But when I recently, I experienced my mother's end of life care, which was quite a long period, and it was a time where the Liverpool pathway was in place, and I then went about fighting that particular pathway, and we got it taken off. But recently, I watched my father go from being actually quite well into a care setting, and within 24 hours back into hospital, and actually within a day was in a coma, and it was end of life care. And the experience, I have to say, was quite harrowing within that hospital setting. And it's something that I will live with for the rest of my life. So this is really important. Simple things like, the moistening of the mouth, the tongue, all of the things that people, which I know about, but actually wasn't happening, and how you make that happen as a relative, and what impact you have, and what input you can have in quite challenging environments. And I think a hospital setting is an extremely challenging environment for end of life care. So for me, there is this, just to round that off, is that if we can get people back into a setting of their choice, and make sure that we have the appropriate care and support. And of course, I haven't touched on training, but I'll stop in a moment. But the training of staff, the people that support that experience, and that bereavement counselling for them as well, where it is a long-term one.
Yeah, thank you, Nadra, and thank you for sharing your personal experiences there as well. Paula, Nadra obviously spoke about hospitals, and I just wondered if you could share your experiences on how you manage those relationships, and also when people are discharged, and like Nadra just mentioned, the sort of having those difficult conversations.
Yeah. Thank you, Nadra, again for talking personally as well. I think it's always helpful to really understand those personal journeys. So thank you. Gosh. For me, listening to you, it made me think of what I want now, and as I change naturally, how I age naturally, and the important things I say to my family, or important people that matter to me, so that if I'm in a position that I can't communicate, they know what's important to me. Even down to the fact that I have to have strong coffee in the morning, strong tea in the afternoon, and I must have a non-peaty whiskey in the evening. So I think it's those conversations that are had during life transitions, if you can. Okay, so going back to the hospital, with our lovely residents here, I am trying to instill in staff to have those important conversations when they come to us. Do they want to go back into hospital? Do they want to remain in the care home? See, I think when people who are very frail and haven't communicated, they're often not asked, what's your ceiling of care? What matters to you right now? What are your priorities? You know, if you go into hospital, you will be treated, perhaps, unless you say otherwise, because hospitals are for treating. And I'm finding that often people fall through the net if they are identified as palliative. They don't go through to the palliative care team. And so I'm also seeing a big rise in fast track continuing healthcare from hospital since COVID as well. And people are rushed into our care homes, and it's reactive, and it's a lot of proactive. So, you know, that's kind of a quick overview from me. And it's quite sad in many respects, because I always start with, tell me more about what's going on for you, if they can communicate. But if they can't, and they do have a lasting power of attorney for health and welfare, it's often a lot of pressure for that dedicated person, because they'll often say, well, I've got the legal document, but I didn't actually ask them what's important to them. And I get ever so sad about that, because they say, I wish we'd spoken earlier. And I remember one of the themes for Dying Matters, about many, many years ago, was the poster saying, I wish we'd spoken earlier.
Yeah, no, and it comes back, doesn't it, to the awareness week of talking about a death and dying, and also putting those plans in place. You know, when we think about, you know, the wills and the legacies and the power of attorneys and things like that, which is
and this is where staff, I think, in our care homes struggle, not because they don't care. I think there are cultural barriers to think about. That staff themselves come from a different culture, and actually you mustn't talk to your elder about these things. There's a lot to consider, and their own emotions around that, and perhaps thinking someone else will do that. I don't want to upset them, because in Judaism, life is considered precious and God decides, not in every layer of Judaism, but there's that challenge as well to consider.
Thank you, Paula. And Claire Towns from Mary Stephen's Hospice, you've received an outstanding rating from the regulator. I wondered, in some of the things we've spoken about here, in terms of making sure that, you know, we really understand the individual and we really meet the needs of that individual that you're caring for. How do you work with families effectively to support that?
Thanks, Olivia. I think for me, and listening also to Nadra's points and Paula's, we have to think about early communication to start with. So sometimes when we think about a hospice inpatient unit, that's too late in a patient's journey. We need to take a step back into communities and into a person's normal place of care, so where they consider to be home, be the community or a care home. And we really need to be initiating open conversations around what people want at end of life care. So we do this through our day hospice services, through our clinics, and do the All About Me documents, and actually considering what a person thinks they want at that point in time, which might change. I think it's really important to constantly review what a person wants. So for us in a hospice, I guess we're quite privileged. We have good staffing levels, and, you know, proportionally out of the community see smaller numbers of people. I think as a hospice, it's really important to go out to other care providers. So I think one of our key roles is education. We need to be out there working hand in hand with care homes, with hospital providers, with acute services, with community care services, ensuring that it doesn't matter where a person is at end of life, everybody should have the same access to equitable end of life care. So it shouldn't matter whether we die in a hospice, which is seen as gold standard, where you get all the lovely add-ons, and you shouldn't have to worry about whether someone's receiving good oral care, their symptoms are being maintained, they've got all the people they want around them, they've got the cat under the bed, the dog on the bed, family pictures. That should be the same everywhere, shouldn't it? Why should it be exclusive for someone coming into a hospice? You should be able to receive that in an acute care setting. And as Nadra said, you don't get that. And yes, they've got lower staffing levels, but everybody should be aware of the importance of that end of life journey. You only get, it's a trite saying, you only get one chance to get it right. You can't the next day go back and think, oh, we missed that for that patient, for that family. It's gone, the moment is gone. So I think early conversations, really important. And actually finding out what matters to a person and what matters to the people that they class as their family, relatives, carers, friends around them. I think we have to realise that that's a desire. It isn't always something that can be achieved. So, when you look at the number of hospices through the UK, they only have a limited number of beds. And a lot of people might say, I want to be in a hospice. That isn't necessarily always achievable. So actually, if people want to be at home or in their care home or in hospital, for us as a provider, it's making sure that we educate others to deliver the same standards of care. And I think the other thing that for me that I'm really passionate about is looking at the communities that we don't know about. So the hidden communities, the communities without a voice, who perhaps can't express to us what their end of life wishes are. And again, as a hospice care provider, that's something that we've been working on now for 4 or 5 years, to look at different communities and actually trying to give them a voice to make their end of life wishes understood.
Fantastic, Claire. Yeah, and clearly you're doing some excellent work in that area, and so that's brilliant to hear about that. Claire Henry, you're patiently waiting there for your moment. And Claire, we mentioned actually just before the call, we sort of discussed around resources and training for providers. And I know you have a wealth, which obviously listeners can get in touch afterwards, because we can share those with them. But it'd be interesting maybe just to share the best practice, I suppose, and those, where providers need to go to access that, to upskill the workforce, but also to be knowledgeable about how to manage those difficult conversations.
Yeah, thank you. And there's lots of different resources out that can be used, but it's finding the time and where to access them is really challenging, because I think if we can pull them together into a resource, because Skills for Care have got some amazing resources that have been updated around palliative and end of life care, very much aimed at managers, but they are really useful resources, because sometimes, we talk about the care home sector in its broadest sense. Sometimes especially some of the residential, they will have very few end of life care for a while, and suddenly then they'll need some more, and they'll need that information. So it's how you can access that, and having those really useful resources. Another one specifically aimed at staff who are working with people with learning disabilities. There's some work that's on the Learning Disability Nurses website, which are just some grab and go guides, which would develop specifically for people just to have that useful information. Where's the updated information? Lots of useful links. So I think those things are really, really important. And also, again, coming back to Skills for Care, there's the access for the e-learning for health. So there's those ongoing modules. But also, I think the other thing is that you can't beat is that local relationship, the local relationship with your palliative care service, your, whether that be your hospice, your community nurses, your hospital. That is absolutely fundamental, and it's really important, and asking for that advice, because we know everybody is slightly different, and it's thinking, what do people need, whether they're being cared for at home, whether in a care home, which is their home, and I say that regularly, that is their home. But I think it's also thinking about the staff that are there and what can influence them, and the education side is not necessarily always, you need to think about what they can do, but also what experience have they had around end of life care. So what have they had personally, because that can influence how they care for someone. So I know I've had some really good training around end of life care, death, dying and awareness for staff, so they can explore how they feel, how they talk about it, because we know this country is so great for its cultural diversity, which is absolutely fantastic, but it's actually thinking what different words mean to different people and what things are in sort of. So I feel that is such an important area to do, and that communication. I think also sometimes other sectors, when we think about choice, hospital don't know what great care homes can give, or support in housing schemes in others. So it's that understanding each other's role is really, really important. So for me, that's imperative. And there is so much good practice out there, and your awards just show that. We've got some great ones, with the work that's been done at the hospices, and Jewish Care, and the Anne Robson Trust, about that thinking about people dying alone. It's really important to think actually using volunteers to sit with people so they don't die alone, because we only get one chance, as Claire said, to get it right, and actually being there as somebody and that really special intimate moment is such a privilege. So there's lots of different things there around the importance, lots of resources, and I would definitely contact CMM, because we can have a list of resources that people can access.
Thanks, Claire. No, yeah, definitely. We'll certainly share those links for further reading and take home advice. And just touch on that, having someone, a volunteer or that person, to hold their hand is just so really poignant and really quite powerful, that comment, Claire. And Paula's got actually waiting for it. She's got her hand up ready. I was actually going to go to you, Paula. You beat me to it. But it'd be interesting to hear some scenarios there, and just to really show how Jewish Care has excelled in that area. So someone,
Sure.
isn't alone, and it'd be nice to, obviously we're not going to mention individuals or anything, but just to share any
excuse me, thank you, Olivia. What I wanted to say in response to Claire is that I think what's very important is, and I appreciate you can only get it right once, but I think after death reflections are greatly nourishing. So it's not about blame or it's your fault or anything. What did we do that was good? What not so good? What can we improve upon? And I think that's really been quite cathartic here, and that gives staff I can see now. We'll help them achieve that next time. But I think pastoral volunteers, we're desperately trying to train them up, as Claire said, with the lovely big shout out for Anne Robson Trust. But pastoral volunteers are literally, I've got a badge here, it's brand new, saying I listen. So we'll walk into a resident's room who may not be able to, or maybe doesn't want to speak, but we could just be with them, sit in the room and be with them, so they don't feel alone in their worries or fear if they're not ready to talk. But I think also for Jewish Care, our culture does feature quite a lot with volunteering, because it's called, there's three things the world stands. It's learning about our religion, religious text, charity, giving financial contribution, and your time is considered a good deed. And it's really an act of kindness. So we get Jewish Care have thousands of volunteers spread across all of our resources. So we're blessed and thankful. So that's helped staff along, to actually support people holistically rather than just medically.
Great, thank you, Paula. And Claire Henry, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick the point up about care after death and the bereavement, and the importance of recognizing that and allowing staff to actually have that time, whether it's going to the funeral, whether it's having the memories and sharing those memories, is really, really important, because they've built such an amazing relationship. And I also think, just picking up Paula's point about listening is so important, and thinking around bereavement. often families want to have that support. It's not about counselling, it's having that support and listening. And there's some great examples across the country of bereavement help points where, again, volunteers are trained to listen and can refer to, pass on and refer to others, but they do that signposting. And that's just so important, because people want to share their story, they want to say how they feel. And also it's about normalizing how you feel, because you will feel sad, you will go through lots of different emotions, but actually having that opportunity to talk to somebody and talk as a group of staff is absolutely critical. So I just wanted to add that, and you can get it definitely from support from hospices and other organizations, but that community support and going and asking someone how they are, really important, but empowering people to do that.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, and awareness weeks like Diabetes Week, obviously just being so crucial. Actually, according to Hospice UK, 57% of employees will have experienced a bereavement in the last 5 years, but yet fewer than 1 in 5 managers feel confident to support someone they manage with a bereavement. So 1 in 5 managers not only have feeling that they have the confidence there. So clearly quite a lot of work still to be done. Claire from Mary Stevens.
Thank you. It was just to echo what Claire and Paula were saying, really. So over the past 12 months within the hospice setting, we've brought in reflective sessions for staff. So each week we discuss patients that have died and give staff the chance to sort of explore the care and what went well and what didn't, to give them a chance to reflect on their own emotion. And that's evaluated really well. But the other thing is to echo Claire's discussion around bereavement. We've migrated our bereavement services. So historically, we only looked after people that we knew of. And over the last 18 months, we've now set up bereavement information points in our community, and we run bereavement hubs for the general public, so they're people we don't know. And it's amazing the amount of people that are out there that just want a supportive listener. So our services are managed by volunteers that are specifically trained in bereavement support, but in that active listening. And those services in community for our communities are absolutely invaluable.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you for sharing that. And I wondered, Claire, actually, and Paula, if you had that best case example and sort of to really I suppose just to illustrate really to other providers listening, when a family has come up to you and said thank you, really.
I mean, I've just had not just me, but the organisation, and particularly our nursing home, a wonderful young resident was admitted. It's very rare for us to have young, but rather it's generally late 80s, early 90s. And this lady was in our local hospice, but couldn't stay there longer and chose to come in to us. And she had a teenage daughter, and we were thinking holistically about everyone involved in this lady's life, what matters to her, very, very quickly. What mattered to her in observing what's important things in her room and listening to her was a photo of her daughter and a horse. And she said, those are the things that matter to me most, but I can't get to see the horse. So cut a long story short, we brought the horse to the campus. We had to do a risk assessment for a horse, who was going to clear away the natural debris, etc. And why I'm sharing this is staff contributed to this winningly, because they felt they're the same age as this lovely lady, and it raised their own mortality issues, and they felt they were doing something to give her quality. And the nourishment that the daughter got from doing this activity together with the staff was a beautiful thing to see, and it was a very joyous moment. And as lovely Dame Cicely Saunders said, how someone dies remains in the memory of those that live on. And so the daughter was so grateful to have given this gift to her mum, where she'll said it will remain with her for the rest of her life. And the staff felt invigorated by that. They actually did something that was meaningful. So I thought that was a great example of real good team collaboration.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, no, that's really quite wonderful, really, and in such a tragic time, and to bring that that connection, I suppose. I think that goes back to what you said at the beginning, Paula, around understanding what makes that individual happy. What do they like? What are their interests?
Yeah.
And it's having those earlier conversations, isn't it?
But I think it also stimulated the staff's confidence. Can we do this? I said, you sure can. I'm going to make sure it happens with you. So I knew all the background stuff to do, the silly risk assessments, what have you. But they're not silly, but they've got to be. But they were grateful. Their suggestion became a reality, and they were inspired by it to do something like that the next time, that's creative and not just medical.
Do you think there's enough of that happening?
No, I don't. I think, bless them, they are pushed beyond belief, because admission after admission, death after death. We've seen a huge rise in death since COVID, not just COVID related. People living longer. Hospitals want discharged quickly when they know they are palliative. People are, I don't know how much choice people are given in hospital. Do you want to go home? And I agree, I wish it was more equitable. Night support, night funding support seems to be a challenge. And there's also the balance of the person may want to go home, but if there's a partner there, actually asking the carer, I don't think I can cope with the death here, or it could be the other way around. So it's important to understand what's your understanding of the situation as well. And this is what you want too. Does that make sense? Because sometimes it's not always. When I used to work for the hospice many years ago, I was working with the complexities of the wants and desires of the patient / person over the family. Couldn't.
No, absolutely. No, yeah, I was going to mention. Yeah, no, that must be. Yeah. Nadra, did you have something to add on that?
No, I just wanted to. Funnily enough, it was a question that was bubbling at the back of my mind as I was listening to you, Paula, because when everything goes well, it goes well, and there are amazing things that our teams do in order to support people. But I just wanted to pose a question to you all, really, around that, because we all know that there will be family disagreements about what happens and what doesn't happen. And we also know what happens actually after somebody passes away about the wishes. Although you might have them logged on, you'll get some family conflict about the undertake or the date or whatever. I mean, I think it'd be really helpful, because we need to keep the families. We need to keep in check the fact that families bereaved, but how do you feel you then maneuver that out into the next stage, which is to make it an experience that will be a good close to that person's life? I just wonder, I think, Paula, you started talking about it. I feel it's a really important one.
Okay. From my experience over many, many years, both in the community and in care, it's about what matters to that human being, first of all, the person. They're in the center. And then if the important person in their life, if I ask them, who's important to you to help you make decisions, what do they understand of the situation? Sometimes not just in Judaism, but an example will be in Judaism. We had an experience many years ago where the father was a regular Jew. Now, I'm a regular Jew. I'm not strictly Orthodox. His daughter has become more Orthodox. He wanted to stop his treatment. She wanted him to carry on. Okay. Now, rather than say, sorry, daughter, ignoring you, we're going on, that wouldn't have helped the dynamic between father and daughter. So we've managed to get them together and listen about what's important to you. What was important to the daughter was that she sought rabbinical external guidance to reassure her that she should respect her father's desire to choose not to have active treatment for various reasons. And by that facilitation of that sensitive communication, coordinating it, it was achieved. It was painful for her, but she came to understand she must respect her father's wishes. It can't be her coercing him. So that's just one example. And there's many like that. But I think there's also important, I'm quite hot on doing my due diligence, where there's been times where on the documentation, it might say they want cremation or burial, or the family wants something different. And that it's managing those sensitivities, but maybe including rabbinical consent, going at their pace, their sensitivity, rather than coming in hard and saying, sorry, law says, blah, it doesn't work. It's working sensitively with them, but at the same time, being quite firm, putting the person at the heart. Have I made some sense?
I think that's, I mean, it's really helpful, because you just saying about the do not resuscitate thing has just reminded me about, you know, my personal experience. My father did not want to die. Basically, he was somebody, the age of 94, just thought, you know, he should be able to go on living forever. And we were quite happy to support all of that. I mean, he was just so full of life. But what was interesting was right at the end, when he was very poorly and the organs were failing and he was in a coma, basically he wasn't going to get any better. The doctors were actually saying to us, you need to sign this form. The pressure on us as a family was to make a decision which we knew was against our father's wishes, and being Muslims, you know, you don't hasten death, if you like, you know, all of those sorts of things. And so I think those are the complexities of families having to make those decisions, where a consultant saying, well, even if we did resuscitate him, he would never get a place in ICU. He's not high priority, all of those kinds of things. Quite mixed, isn't it? And I was just thinking about, Claire, from the hospice perspective. I know in a way there is, you've got your hand up. I'll let you contribute. Sorry, I'm not.
Thank you. So I was just thinking, it's very much about facilitating those conversations between families. I think you would often expect that when patients come into a hospice, those decisions have been made, particularly around do not resuscitate, and quite often they haven't. They're hard decisions that are left for us to have here with families. And there are still some patients who would want to be resuscitated, you know, that's their hope, unrealistic hope. So it's very much around facilitating those conversations around end of life, giving patients the opportunities to explore with their families, maybe with a member of staff there or a volunteer, what matters to them at end of life. And actually to make some of those, if they feel able, funeral decisions, because that actually will benefit the family, relatives, carers immensely, unless there's a great disparity in what they wish to do. Actually knowing for most people that you're doing what your loved one wanted you to do will bring some ease really through that start of the grief, the bereavement journey. I just think that's really, really important.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks so much for sharing. Claire Henry, did you have something to add on?
Yeah, just to add on that, I think also when somebody, you know, sort of their loved one is dying, that can actually sort of like fracture the family, because if their relationships aren't good or there's something, it's being mindful of what those long-term relationships have been like. And this can act as bringing them together, but it can actually make it much worse. So it's understanding that, and I think especially in care care and health. We like to bring people in and fix it, and sometimes we can't always do that. And I think that's sometimes what we have to actually admit. And it's how the family works together. And also, I think, just very briefly, that in the bereavement side, that's another time, if there hasn't been a will made, if it hasn't been sorted out, my goodness, can that cause huge problems for the family. And I've seen really close families absolutely broken and distraught and have not spoken to each other because it hadn't been clear, hadn't been sorted. And actually, at a time when everybody's really vulnerable, that is just not the time to be having some of these discussions. So I've seen that side of things as well. So, I just wanted to add that point, because I think it's really important that we think about it as the whole, and sometimes we can't fix it.
And just being united and trying to ensure that everyone is united at that point, before it's too late, is really important. Yeah.
May I just add a couple of things? In order to kind of pick up on emotional vibes, I think we also have learnt from listening to people is that we don't actually refer to people, loved ones, actually, because they've told us, actually, I don't love my mother or father or aunt and uncle. I'm doing this out of duty. So please don't label me like, it's quite.
No, that's, but that language again, isn't it? Yeah.
And the second thing, I think people listen and learn in different ways. And sometimes people, when you're having the discussion of DNL, CPR, we found that they've forgotten what you said. So we've just literally, this is just now, literally picked it up yesterday, an explanatory leaflet, so people can take it away and have a little read about it. And then we can evidence on documentation. They still want resuscitation even after reading this leaflet. It's like an improper informed decision.
We're a very diverse society now, and we're starting to look after people from very diverse backgrounds. So not specific as in Jewish care, but, across the care sector. But we're also, we have quite a diverse workforce, especially when you look at international recruitment and all of that. So people will have different cultural experiences. So if somebody's coming, if you've got members of staff who are from India, they have very different way of dealing with that. And I think we also need to be mindful, very, very mindful of all of that. And I remember when one of my aunts was passing away, and she was in a care home, and the care home rang me. She had no children. She was a spinster. And they said, is there anything else we can do? It was in the middle of COVID, so there was no visiting and all of that. And I said, if you've got an iPad or a phone or something which has got the Quran on it, one of the things that we do is in the Islamic faith is that you have the Quran playing in the background. It's supposed to bring peace. Now, that little thing they did do, and it made me feel better as a distant relative, if you like. So that cultural importance, and I remember being part of a publication many years ago called Culturally Competent, which the department commissioned, and it was written by us, and it looked across all the different cultures, and we wanted it to be used as an aid to help staff to understand all the different cultures. So we went through all of it, Sikhism, Judaism, Christianity, because there are different cultural bits in the UK itself as well about what happens. My aunt's Irish, and she talks a lot about the way the Irish, Southern Irish components. I just wanted to bring that in, Olivia, just to kind of
I think that's really helpful. I think that's really important.
Very
helpful. Thank you, Nadra.
Spirituality at end of life is paramount. It's even if people can't express it, they might want to look at certain favorite foods or traditions, or hear certain sounds that, even if they can't communicate, it's comforting.
Yeah, definitely. And Claire Towns?
Thank you. I just wanted to support really what Nadra was saying. And as a hospice, we recognise that there are so many communities that are, have different needs at end of life. And I think, we should all realise that care needs to be person-centred, and services should pay specific attention to needs and preferences of individuals. And we've just been working for the last 2 years in co-production on a research project looking at different cultures at end of life, and working alongside communities in co-production to look at how we address people's needs at end of life.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Claire. That's really wonderful to hear that work's taking place and is happening. Claire Henry.
I just really wanted to sort of add points that the little things can make the really big difference, and everybody has got a role to play when caring for somebody who is at the end, sort of is end of life care or has that terminal diagnosis. Because actually, Paula, you were saying, you know, having that whiskey is really important, or actually, you know, having the Quran playing, all of those things. It's the small things, and actually, you know, the music, anything like that. So I just want to say that we can all make a difference. If we all did something small, we could all make a difference. Because yeah, you can't always get the choices you make, but wherever you are, it's thinking what's important to you. So it can be that making sure you've got your dog or you've got your relative, you know, whoever it is. But I just think everyone has a part to play, and we don't need to be frightened of it. We need to think about it and just think of those and think what have our experiences done, and what would make that difference to somebody else, and what would make that difference that we'd notice for loved ones. And just again, just sharing my very personal experience. My father died in hospital. We weren't there. It was handled not very well. But the thing that stood out in my mind, a junior staff nurse said to me, "We will care for your dad. We'll look after him. Don't worry." That was absolutely fundamental, because it reassured us. So by saying that, it made such a difference. So really thinking about the conversation and what people say is important. But everybody, I just want to say, everybody can make a difference, and just think about who you're caring for.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, and there's also, like, you know, nothing is too small, you know, in terms of, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, this you know, big gesture or anything. It's you know, really one small thing can make that difference as well, and for the family. And like Paula obviously mentioned, you know, is that final moment with the daughter, you know, and the horse and everything, that's going to last, you know, that's going to stay with her, isn't it, forever. So really wonderful to hear that story.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that we all have today, but also as a society, that I think death has become, you know, it's, as again, you know, I think both Claires talked about, you know, trite sayings, but it is it's a subject that people, I think, do want to talk about, but are frightened to, the what ifs. But I want to have a culture change that just to regulate that death is normal and it's part of our life. You know, the king, he's going to die as well one day. We're all the same, no matter what religion, colour, we're all going to same, and it's the how it happens. But it really is about, you know, people that are left behind that are going to, that affects their bereavement journey. So if it can be as normalized as possible, that they can say that they listened to what matters most and did what they could, their journey of grief can be as good as it can be. And I think that's what drives me, is that it's a privilege and an honor to support our lovely residents or people we support in the community to have the best journey that they can, and that for people who are left behind, that can enjoy their memories rather than be scarred by that was awful. And that is where we're all doing, aren't we? We're trying to just educate, nourish, support, work alongside our lovely colleagues who are wanting this too. It's a challenge, but one that I know we'll continue on doing because it matters most to us.
Oh, thank you, Paula. Yeah, and thank you so much for, you know, to all of you for all you do in the sector, and your support, that, you know, you're caring for people in the final days of life. It really is.
It's an honor.
Wonderful. I think everyone is, very lucky for everyone to join us today. All incredibly busy people. So I just want to thank our guests, our co-host, Nadra Ahmed from the National Care Association, and Claire Towns from Mary Stevens Hospice, and also Markel, Third Sector Award winner this year. Paula Plaskow from Jewish Care, who is the Palliative and End of Life Care Lead. And of course, Claire Henry from Claire Henry Associates. And as mentioned, we will make sure that we share the resources that Claire mentioned, so everyone can do some more further reading and learning. Obviously very important to do that as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Today's podcast mentioned the Markel Third Sector Care Awards. The awards are designed to reward the hard work, dedication, innovation, and excellence of everyone working in the not-for-profit sector who is making a positive difference to people's lives, whether they're supporting children or adults. Congratulations again to today's podcast guests, Jewish Care, whose End of Life and Palliative Care team won the End of Life Care Award in 2022. And also congratulations to Mary Stevens Hospice, who won the Development and Innovation Award in 2023. Organised by CMM and developed in conjunction with the National Care Forum, the Markel Third Sector Care Awards are the perfect way to share the work you've been doing to support those who need it most. Anyone can enter themselves or nominate someone else in one of our categories, no matter what their position in an organisation. And because we know budgets can be tight, we don't charge for entries. Nominations open on Friday the 1st of September and close on Friday the 27th of October. Don't miss out. Search Markel Third Sector Care Awards online to find out more information. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of CMM Off the Page.
Thank you for tuning in to CMM Off the Page. Explore CMM's portfolio of content, including daily news, blogs, a magazine, and CMM Insight webinars by visiting www.caremanagementmatters.co.uk. To make sure you don't miss a podcast, follow CMM on Twitter @CMM_magazine and use the hashtag CMM Off the Page to join the conversation and share your feedback. See you next time. CMM Off the Page. Listen, learn, lead.